Our first guest has been at the helm of America's national security for decades, leading the CIA, serving as Secretary of Defense, advising presidents through moments that defined global stability and instability. He now continues that work as the co-founder and chairman of the Panetta Institute for Public Policy and as co-host of One Decision, a global affairs podcast. Please join me in welcoming Secretary Leon Panetta. Secretary, thank you for being here today.
Good to be here.
There's a lot of news in the world at the moment, so I'm glad you joined us on this stage. This conference kicks off amid a weeks-long government shutdown. Lots of question about soldier pay, about when this will get resolved, what this means for U.S. posture around the world. What message do you think this sends to other countries abroad, particularly Russia, China, North Korea?
Well, pure and simple, it sends a message of weakness. Look, the reality is, I know we're talking about the future of defense, but in a democracy, you're not going to have a strong defense without strong governing in a democracy. And right now, both parties and the president are failing to govern. And so we're in a shutdown. The fact is, every time this time of year in Washington, when it comes to the appropriations process, appropriations are never completed on time. The last time appropriations bills were completed on time, I think I was director of OMB. And the fact is that when you do it on time, that makes the budget process work. The budget process is broken. And because it's broken, because we haven't passed budget resolutions, and all we've done is come to a point where we always have to pass a CR, the reality is, how can defense depend on any CR in terms of being able to fund all the things that need to be funded if you care about the future of defense? So the reality is the failure of Congress to govern, the failure of both parties to come together to govern this country. That's why people elect members of Congress. They don't elect them to come back here and engage in trench warfare. They elect people to go to Washington to govern and make decisions. And if we fail to do that, that sends a fundamental message of weakness to all of our adversaries that democracy is not working.
And to that point, does this national security moment, an aggressive China, a Russian-aligned North Korea, a Middle East greatly in flux, and like a quiet U.S. bombing campaign in the Horn of Africa, on top of a government shutdown, does this moment have a historic parallel?
Yeah, look, I think that we're facing more flashpoints in the world today in terms of national security than we have since World War II. There are more flashpoints that could result in a potential conflict. Talking about China, Taiwan, talking obviously about Russia and Ukraine and aggression in Europe, talking about North Korea having a nuclear stockpile and the missile capability to deliver that nuclear stockpile. We're talking about Iran, which still remains a country where we're not certain whether or not they have sufficient enriched fuel to develop a nuclear weapon. We don't know the answer to that. And so they remain a threat.
Do you think we destroyed Iran's nuclear facilities in Midnight Hammer?
No. I think Iran was smart enough to move their enriched fuel to other sites. And so for that reason, I think that they still represent a real threat if they decide to go forward and develop a nuclear weapon. And the last point is terrorism. We are still confronting terrorism in the world. We went after Al-Qaeda We were able to go after their leadership, but the reality is that terrorism has now metastasized into ISIS, into Boko Haram, into other terrorist groups. And they still have a goal of attacking our country and attacking other Western countries. So when you look at that picture of the world and the different threats that are out there, we are very much in a situation where we're not just looking at one or another major threat, we are looking at a multiple series of flashpoints that could turn into a conflict.
Do you think the U.S. industrial base is ready for a multiple flashpoint war? There's a lot of concerns about stockpiles, of course.
Well, look, I think it begins with the Defense Department. The Defense Department and our forces are going to have to go through a transformational change. It's absolutely essential. You're dealing with AI. You're dealing with autonomous weapons of one kind or another. You're dealing with technology. You're dealing with cyber. We have got to go through a transformational change in order to be able to deal with the new technologies that are out there. And the real question is the Pentagon thinking about how do we ultimately go through that transformational change, but more importantly, develop a sufficient mass in terms of our military power to be able to deter China, Russia, and the other adversaries that are out there. And I don't think the answer to that has really been attended to by the Defense Department.
Are you seeing transformation right now in today's Pentagon toward that mass? Is there a hint of it right now with some of these EOs, with some of these directives coming out with, the service secretaries talking to industry more often?
Well, look, I think the fact that 800 of our commanders were called to this town to sit in a room. These are our top military commanders. Take my word for it. They are top military commanders, admirals, generals who are on the front lines dealing with threats. To call them back here, put them in a room, and it's a perfect opportunity to talk about where are we going in the 21st century with regards to our defense force. What do we need to develop in terms of weapons? What do we need to do in terms of change? What do we need to do in order to maintain America as the #1 military power on the face of the earth? Instead of that, they basically had a recruiting speech and a talk about the fact that we're too wrapped up with woke, other cultural issues. They failed to address the major issues that the people in that room really do care about.
Would you have called those generals and admirals to Quantico or another base to give that sort of speech about the future?
No, hell no. That's a waste of time.
And money, I would assume.
Come on. We did. Look, there is a moment where you may want to bring our commanders here. And we did that in the Obama administration when we did a new defense strategy and developed it with the military, developed it with the president's input. And the president, when he was finalizing it, said, I want to meet with my combatant commanders. So we called all of the combatant commanders, plus the Joint Chiefs of Staff. We met in the dining room at the White House, and he basically wanted their input. He described what was in our new defense strategy, and then we had a conversation about what changes they would recommend and which ones they supported. That's appropriate. That's what you do. These are busy guys. They're on the front lines, for God's sakes. You don't call them back here to give them a political speech. You call them back here to get their views on how we improve our defense system.
On the point of a new defense strategy, right, there's been a lot of reporting recently that this upcoming one will focus heavily on the homeland, on our hemisphere, especially considering something like Golden Dome. Are you concerned that the prior priorities of China, of the Middle East, will be outshone or eclipsed because of such an interior focus?
Look, I think our national security is at stake right now. I just described what the threats in the world were. We have enemies that are out to undermine our democracy. China wants to become the #1 power in the world. Putin has one goal and one goal only, which is to undermine the United States of America. That's always been what he's been after. North Korea, same thing. Iran and terrorists and other issues. This is a dangerous world. We've got to be prepared to deal with that dangerous world. Yes, we want to provide homeland security. Yes, you want to defend the homeland. Yes, you want to provide security for the American people. But you don't do that by ignoring our primary adversaries, who are those countries, those autocracies that basically want to end our democracy. So we've got to wake up and recognize what is the major threat to our national security. And it's not coming from Michigan, it's not coming from New York, it's not coming from San Francisco, it's coming from foreign adversaries who want to defeat our country, period.
I want to pivot here real quick and ask you how you're thinking about today's defense tech zeitgeist. Big versus small collaboration. You see a lot of smaller companies winning some lucrative contracts. What do you make of that, and maybe this idea of American reindustrialization?
I think because we have to go through this transformation in order to deal with, look, the threats that we're seeing in the 21st century. We've got to develop a defense system for the 21st century. You can't go back to the 90s. You got to go into the 21st century. So that's where we have to focus. And we have to look at all of the changes that are confronting us in the 21st century. And the reality is that because a lot of that relates to technology, to AI, to cyber, to quantum computing, to all of the things that we've got to do, we have got to develop a partnership with the private sector, the industrial base. It can't be a question anymore of just simply saying to a company, develop a weapon system. That doesn't work right now. We've got to have a partnership because, frankly, the private sector has a hell of a lot more knowledge about what's happening with AI, what's happening with weapon systems, what's happening with new technologies than DoD does. And so there has got to be a better partnership. We've got to, frankly, the procurement process of the 1990s doesn't work right now. We have got to take the procurement process and shape it so that it fits the needs of the 21st century.
But what's holding that up, right? Because I hear that all the time from Congress, from CEOs, from former defense secretaries. Why isn't that sticking?
It doesn't happen because everybody goes back to their nice, comfortable little position, whether it's up in the Congress or whether it's at the Pentagon. Nobody wants to make waves. And the reality is, if you want to go through transformational change, you're going to have to make waves. We're going to have to change things. Congress is going to have to be, they can't just worry about what particular weapon system they're developing in their district. They got to worry about our national security. And the Pentagon has got to make that point as well. The Pentagon sometimes gets trapped by its own history and basically wants to repeat weapon systems from the past as opposed to the future. That's got to change. We are in a new century. We're confronting, for those of you that work with AI, those of you that work with this, with cyber technology, you know what I'm talking about. This is dangerous stuff. This is stuff we've got. My fear is that China, as an example, could leapfrog us in terms of the development of AI or cyber or other areas, particularly space. And we have to recognize the threats that are there, and we've got to develop the brain power and the partnership with the private sector to be able to say the United States is going to be ahead of this curve, not behind it.
Secretary Panetta, we're going to have to leave it there. We're getting the hook. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you for your service.
God bless you. Thank you very much.
You'll stick around. There's more to come.